2012, the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat is meeting in China for the first time. With your perspective, what does that mean for the business?
Well, I think there's no more appropriate place in the world probably for this meeting to take place than here in Shanghai. I mean, if you look at how this city's evolved and how it's grown, over the last 10 years, even the last 20 years, but particularly in the more recent, last 5 or 8 years, it's extraordinary, the amount of buildings that have been done here. I don't think there's any place, Dubai may compete in some way, but when you look at overall context, particularly when you look at the sustaining ability of the development to proceed, there's no place that's had this kind of growth, I don't think, in history.
But just, the sheer volume of contact now between East and West certainly probably wasn't very easy to do in the past, and now there's just so much dialogue going on. What's that mean to you?
Well, it means there's more competition, but I think we're so firmly established here that we have, our own, set of business objectives that we have a lot of opportunity to fulfill those. But having other people here creates, a competition which allows for newer ideas, exchange of Chinese thoughts with Western thoughts, and in the end meld the two together to create, kind of a modern, contemporary city.
Well, really everyone is following in your footsteps. You were one of the pioneers here that made this market happen. Take us back to the first project and the beginnings of Portman in China. What was the first project here?
First project was, after we came in '79, we signed a protocol in Beijing to do 13 hotels in various cities in China. And in the end, we signed a contract to design, as architect, a building on the site which we selected, which is the Shanghai Center site on Nanjing Road. They said, give us 4 months to arrange the financing, then we can begin. After 4 months, they came back and said, we can't arrange the financing. Can you help us? Anybody putting money in had no security. So the only way I could raise the debt to come in was to have a Bank of China guarantee. And they gave me a guarantee for a sizable portion of the contract amount. And then I brought in AIG and Kojima as partners, and with Portman we put in the equity. And that gave us enough money to build Shanghai Center, a 2 million square foot mixed-use development.
So right now we're sitting in Pudong, in a district called Lujiazui, that I guess 20 years ago was an empty field, pretty much. Was there a critical mass point in the development of this market? One era or one project you can point to, one place in time where things really started to roll in Shanghai?
First of all, in a sense, Lujiazui was created artificially. If it had been left to normal Western supply and demand economics, it would not have happened the way it did. But China and Shanghai decided they wanted this to be the international zone, and they force-fed the area with building. I think normally everyone wanted to be on the Puxi side. So the government needed to do something like that to give a balance so that Shanghai, between Pudong and Puxi, would have a more compact unity.
Was that successful? That's
look out the window.
Right.
Yes, very successful. And today, the government is quite farsighted and very mindful about how best to evolve the development of the city. And there are two other areas, one out near the Hongqiao Airport and the Shanghai Expo area, that are both getting a similar kind of attention in terms of motivating growth that Lujiazui got, 15 years ago.
Well, and the reason I ask that very simple question is when you kind of go against the natural laws of economics, I don't know that cities in America would necessarily try that. Why did it work here, and why would something like that work in the United States or not, or in other markets?
The main reason it worked here is because China began to grow. China began to be an opportunity and attracted people from everywhere. And the city that offers the most for foreign investors is Shanghai. So their planning, their motivation, and their controls to make Lujiazui happen, coupled with the fact that the country was exploding in growth, and Shanghai was the preferred place, made it happen. Now, can those sort of circumstances be duplicated in another location? Probably not. To say it couldn't happen somewhere else may not be accurate, but it would have to be unique to that situation.
One of the things that I always think about when I think of your father is the Atrium Hotel, because he's widely credited with coming up with that idea. And we've got probably the world's most spectacular example of an Atrium Hotel in this building, the Jin Mao building, and I just wonder what goes through your mind and what goes through your dad's mind as you look at something like that, because it is spectacular.
Well, I think naturally there's some flattery involved, but there's also some criticism, because in your own mind, nobody can do it as well as you can, so you look at it and you say, well, what they've done here is a logical solution to the program of the building, and it makes sense to have done that. Would I have done it the same way? Probably not, but that's just a matter of process, a matter of taste, actually. But I will say, that it's very well done.
The future, in terms of how tall we can go or how tall we should go, is that a market that you're necessarily aiming for? Super, super tall?
In some ways, the whole concept of super tall is ridiculous. I mean, is it really necessary? I mean, for what purpose is it done? Different people will have different answers to that question. But from our point of view, we're doing a 151-story building in Seoul. So it's not like we don't like them. Any architect would love to design super high. But you can't just solve the architectural problem with an iconic tall structure. What happens to the user? How do you create the right kind of environment, create the right kind of community in the village sense that the people who are working and living in the project feel? That really determines the success of real estate, not how high it is. It's how the user, how the customer relates and how much he enjoys or wants to be there.
Well, maybe you could comment on an observation I had just walking around here. When you walk outside of this building, you're presented with a lot of open space. You see buildings in the distance that are all kind of lined up, but a lot of green between here and there, and it's a very open feeling that I certainly don't get in Chicago. And I like it quite a lot. I mean, what's your observation of this part of Shanghai?
I think it's boring.
Okay.
Now, it's exciting from a visual point of view. If you're sitting over in Puxi looking across the river, very exciting. But as a pedestrian, walking around in this part of Shanghai, it's not so interesting. You go over to Puxi, where the city evolved, incrementally, rather than all at once. And you have a much more interesting pedestrian experience. And I think Shanghai government would even agree that the way they planned this was almost too suburban in nature rather than urban. And some of the planning that they're doing in Hongqiao and in Expo have taken that into consideration and are trying to create a more street active environment there rather than monuments in the park kind of concept.
And that's a great observation. So I'm definitely going to go across the river now and see what you're talking about, but thank you for that. John Portman III, Jack Portman, thank you for coming to see us in Shanghai.
Quite a pleasure.